Psychological Constructivism. Shapiro and Permuth inform that psychological constructivism deals with how people learn, how people develop their knowledge, their perceptions, their concepts, and attitudes. In this clip, Atticus comes across as being astutely aware of Scout's learning style. His verbal counseling and willingness to elude the teacher's instructions enables Scout to actively construct her own reading practices, which she responds favorably to. Atticus's ability to empower his daughter to self-direct at least some of her own knowledge is aligned with the constructivist belief that knowledge is made, not acquired. Ultimately, Scout is given the freedom to continue her own acquisition of knowledge through reading. Constructivists also uphold the principle that every individual perceives another world. Atticus recognizes that Scout is young and somewhat limited in her perception of the world. He teaches her about the concept of empathy to expand her recognition of others by reminding her that you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view and climb inside of his skin and walk around in it. In order to inspire a shift in paradigm, Atticus gently diminishes Scout's overactive sense of self in favor of a shared perception of the world. Rational choice theory. Atticus presents Scout with a compromise, which he describes as an agreement reached by mutual consent, to help resolve her reading dilemma. This compromise represents an alternative solution that Scout hadn't considered, as she lacks the rational problem-solving skills that Atticus possesses. The third tenet of rational choice theory states, administrators can identify and evaluate alternative solutions, making it possible for them to select the most appropriate decision. While Atticus's decision may not be the most ideal, it provides a satisfactory solution to Scout's problem and demonstrates the manner in which administrators, and presumably all leaders, are counted on to discover insights that others fail to see. Atticus's critical forward thinking reminds Scout that there are opportunities to make choice, even in situations where one is subjected to the influence or the control of others. At the end of the clip, Atticus seems surprised by his own efficiency at appeasing Scout. His adept problem-solving can be at least partially credited to his use of rational thinking. Sir Giovanni, as cited in Brown and Papa, proposed a better fit between theory and practice will occur by choosing the image of rationality that fits the real world first. Atticus begins the process of problem-solving by listening to his daughter closely before selecting the rationale for his compromise. By doing so, he considers the real world first, and then chooses a solution that best fits the circumstance.
Atticus also demonstrates several features of the bounded rational model theory. One of the more recent modifications to rational choice theory is that of the bounded rational choice theory. It recognizes some of the criticisms that are leveled at the theory and tries to include them in the application of it. We think it could apply in particular to the manner in which Atticus makes his decisions. The bounded rational model implies three things. 1. That complete information is not typically available to the decision maker. 2. That decisions are usually made in the context of conflicting values and interests. Bias can rarely be eliminated. 3. Administrators often make decisions by selecting the first available satisfactory course of action, rather than endlessly pursuing the ideal course of action. Atticus does not directly understand the teacher's motives for wanting Scout to learn to read in one way. Although he may have suspicions, he doesn't reveal them. In doing so, he completes the first part of the bounded rational model. In that, he recognizes that not all the information is available to him. He instead makes a decision that directly conflicts with the interests of the teacher, even if this decision was not ideal. The ideal scenario would involve a resolution that included the teacher, but Atticus is trying to make a decision by choosing a most satisfactory course of action. Although not explicitly demonstrated by Atticus, critical feminist theory also plays a significant role in the situation that is occurring. One of the dominant findings of critical feminist theory is that women learn continuously from birth the behavior appropriate to their position, and as they grow older, their behaviors and attitudes are subtly and profoundly molded by their cultural milieu. This is quoted directly from page 977. As a result, we have to recognize that in the clip, the perception of Scout's femininity is socially constructed and plays out in the daily interaction between men and women. However, we also have to recognize that the novel was written quite a bit later, and so it probably represents some of that idea as well as conventional 1930s society. To put this into historical Canadian context, it wasn't until 1929 that women were finally considered persons under Canadian law. And, as an extreme case, it wasn't until 1940 that women were able to vote provincially in Quebec. Therefore, the time period that this clip takes place in, the 1930s, was punctuated by a strong vision of traditional femininity, with only a few beginning a long process of opposition and change. Scout mentions that she was told that she was learning to read all wrong, while it is implied the Cunningham boy was treated differently. It is not clear what the situation was, but given that Scout mentions that the boy was bribed with cash, it is clear that the teacher's approach to the two students was made largely based on the instructor's conception of gender. Scout is expected to listen explicitly and apply directions, while the Cunningham boy needs to be bribed, although he does reject the bribe. Although not explicit, you get the sense that the Cunningham boy's opposition is treated as acceptable, while Scout's opposition is attacked as being wrong. This demonstrates a very hegemonic view of gender during Scout's time. This application of critical feminist theory meets many of the criticisms. White women of middle class. It illuminates the fact that Scout is eager to oppose convention and is upset by the outcome of that opposition. Atticus manages to acknowledge Scout by respecting her criticism. I am certain that an argument could be made that since Scout is being raised by a single male, it stands to reason that her behavior would be closer to that of the hegemonic male view present in society. This question, of course, is up for debate. Nonetheless, we need to recognize that critical feminist theory does play a role in this clip. Although it doesn't necessarily present itself in the form of Atticus, it does have to do with his interaction with Scout.
Now here's a little bit about the leadership theories that are absent from our leadership scenario, starting first with Taylorism and other theories rooted in scientific management. Frederick Taylor delineated the 13 principles of his theory in 1911 when he released The Principles of Scientific Management, which was meant to advance and inform the work of industrial engineers at the turn of the century. Some of the most contended influences that Taylorism has had on education includes an emphasis on outcomes rather than inputs, the separation of planning and doing, and an exclusive focus on the measurable. Taylorism helped to establish a new workplace wherein labor was divided, responsibilities were simplified, and roles were explicitly defined for workers. This type of ideology is largely absent in the leadership scenario presented here. Atticus does not take a formulaic approach to rearing his children and does not expect them to conform to traditional subservient roles. Whereas many parents would be unwilling to compromise with societal expectations of their children, Atticus does exactly that. In spite of the teacher's demand for Scout to abide by certain rules, Atticus finds a way to compromise these rules. Even the traditional role of child seems to be more loosely defined in the Finch family, as is evidenced by the way Scout addresses her father as Atticus instead of Dad. This type of diplomacy is directly opposed to the tenets of Taylorism, thereby marginalizing this theory in the leadership demonstrated here. Critical race theory. The advocates of critical race theory have challenged the palatable belief that America and other Western societies are meritocracies, wherein opportunity is offered to citizens who display knowledge, skill, and other elite talents. These naive perceptions exclude the influence of racism and disregard some major tenets of critical race theory, which includes the notion that racism is a permanent aspect of American life. In this particular clip, the Finch family is presented in an idyllic way. They live in a picturesque Alabama house, complete with a classic porch swing. They appear well-kept and well-dressed, and they're supported by their faithful homemaker, Calpurnia, whom we catch a glimpse of in the opening frame. Although the subject of racial acrimony is one of the most significant themes in the broader context of To Kill a Mockingbird, it does not play a significant role in the leadership scenario depicted here, making this one of the few scenes from the film wherein critical race theory is surprisingly absent.